Load2Learn, making curriculum materials accessible.
So here we are again with Jamie Munro from Inclusive Technologies, talking about assistive technologies for people with print disabilities. And we have now all of these books in digital formats. And so which means we can use them, read them on a computer. But there are also a whole range of devices that are particularly suited for reading ebooks or any sort of digital texts on a hardware device that isn't a big computer with a big screen and a keyboard. So let's talk a bit about them. So what we have a whole pile of these options. So what is it that we see here?
Well, I mean, what we have here is everything from the Kindle, which was probably one of the first of the digital book devices that came around, all the way up to the iPad and one of the new Windows 8 devices that have come along. I mean, digital books have not been around that long. It was only 1996 that the Voyager digital books came out, which was the first digital books that were ever commercially released. And I think one of the problems why at the time no one really took to them was the fact that they only worked on a Macintosh PowerBook 100, which weighed about £5 and cost around £2,500 to buy, which, when you consider the price of a paperback book at 70p, was an awful expensive way of reading, what was effectively, just a paperback book at the time. And I think it's these portable digital devices that have really been the reason why the mainstream have been looking at digital books and, behind the rise of the digital books. We now live in a world where Amazon, which is one of the world's largest book suppliers, sells more digital books than they do paperback books.
So let's start with the thing that started it all.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't the first device of its kind, but it was definitely the one that made a splash.
The first popular one of its kind.
And it's the Kindle from the Amazon.
Yeah. I mean, the great things about the Kindle, it's very light. It's got quite there are different models. This is the one I tend to prefer, which is the Kindle Keyboard 3G, I believe this is called now. The reason I like this one is, first of all, it's accessible in the sense that we can provide physical access to this for those with physical disabilities, and we have a physical access interface for this. But also because this is one of the few models that has text-to-speech enabled, so that if you are struggling to read the text on the screen, this will actually read the text off the screen for you as well. But this will hold up to about 3,500 books, which is roughly the equivalent of about 1.5 tons of paperback books, or 2.5 trees if you actually want to convert it back into wood. So with the average school library with about 10,000 books in it, 3 of these would actually take the entire contents of the average school library. The great thing about it is you can alter the font size on it. So you can, if you've got users with a visual impairment, you can actually make the fonts quite large on this. You can alter the typeface, so you can have a regular one, you can have a much smoother typeface to once again make it easier for those with a visual impairment. You can alter the orientation of the screen, so you can have the text on sideways as well. So there's quite a lot you can do with the actual physical appearance of the screen as well. Because it has got this real ink screen, what it means is that it's actually also readable in daylight, which means that there's no backlighting on it. It means you can actually read it much easier in daylight than you can with some of these other devices. But also, when we're talking about it for users with disabilities, for users with visual impairments, the lack of a backlighting on this is actually an advantage, because it means that they're much less likely to be subject to screen glare if they're using one of these than using one of these devices with a backlit screen.
Of course, the one thing to remember that you also need a source of light when you're reading it. So like a computer, you need a light shining.
Do you still need a reading light with them?
But for me, I use the Kindle every day, and that is a worthwhile trade-off. Actually, I bought a cover that was quite expensive, but it has a light built in and it hooks into the Kindle in it, so I can always read with it, even with that light. So that is a very nice and friendly, user-friendly device. Are there any sort of disadvantages to the Kindle, or sort of things people should be aware of as possible issues?
Well, issues that we do have with some of the issues I have with the Kindle regarding special needs is the text-to-speech in it. One of the things it doesn't do is it doesn't highlight the words as it's reading the text out to you. And research has shown that actually if you're actually working with text-to-speech, actually having the words highlighted so that you keep that link between the words you can see on the screen and the word you can hear can make nearly 20% difference in comprehension levels for those who are using it. It's roughly the old equivalent of running your finger along underneath the words as you're reading them out. So that can make a big difference. You can invert the screen so that you can have white text on the black background, but because it is a simple black and white screen, you can't play around with different colour combinations that you can do on the computer. So if you're using a computer, you can change the background colour of the document into any colour you want, and you can change the colour of the text into any colour that you want. So that you're slightly limited in some of the visual options that you've got on there.
Now this is the Kindle 3G, which means it is anywhere you are, you're pretty much connected to the internet. The thing I like about it, you can email your books to it. So even if you books that you cannot buy on Amazon, or if you have just your own document, you can send an email and it appears on here. But also, it is the more expensive model, and the most. It is. And so, what do you think? We don't have the latest model here, which is about half the price. What do you think about that?
The problem with the one that's half the price is it doesn't have the text-to-speech enabled in it at all, so it doesn't have that capability. So if you don't need the text-to-speech facility, then that's fine. If you do need the text-to-speech facility, then unfortunately, as you often are with things, you need to look at the slightly more expensive option.
The other thing to remember is that the keyboard, and I annotate quite a lot when I read some books, is that the keyboard isn't very good. And but you do lose it on the one on the half price one that doesn't have a keyboard. It's smaller, lighter, fits in more pockets, but you have to select letter by letter. So typing anything is
much slower.
It's much slower. But then most people, when they read fiction and things like that, that's not the sort of thing they need. So that's certainly an option.
Yeah, I mean the only other problem I have with the text-to-speech on this is it's a pity the text-to-speech isn't implemented across the entire interface. One of the great things about reading a digital book is that a lot of these devices have built-in dictionaries. So if you're reading a book and you come to a word you can't understand, you can bring up the dictionary. If only they'd also made that dictionary read the definition of the word out, then I think that would make this a lot better.
Now, so this, again, we're discussing the fact that this is a low glare, no glare book, is due to the screen, which is using a technology called e-ink. The other advantage of it is that the battery lasts for a long time.
Yeah.
So this one, I believe, lasts about almost a month.
That's right. Yeah.
And so that's a useful feature to have.
Definitely.
So, here is another example of an e-ink device. So these are the original ones with buttons and everything. And here's another e-ink device, which is a touch screen. So this is one from Kobo, which is called Kobo Touch, I believe. But there's also a Kindle Touch version.
There's a Kindle Touch.
And Sony makes ones with both buttons and touch ones. So what are your thoughts on the touch devices?
Touch devices, although I was saying before, one of the advantages of touch devices is they may be much easier for people who have a physical disability that can't actually cope with some of these quite small buttons on there. So if you actually have more limited dexterity and you can't cope with those, then a touchscreen may be an actual valuable option for that.
Okay. One of the things that when I've read a few books on the Kobo Touch is that the problem is that sometimes the touch isn't very predictable in responding. Sometimes it takes a while. Like right now, it doesn't seem to be. Oh, I'm in sleep mode, so my apologies to the Kobo. So I just touch a book, and it takes a while. There's that sort of strange delay, but otherwise, when it does work, it works pretty much just like the Kindle.
Yeah.
And I would imagine for somebody who's finding the button difficult, just
touching anywhere on the screen on that side means it's easy for them to take.
And it does both the Kindle Touch. Actually, I don't believe the Kobo does, but the Kindle Touch does have text to speech. Yeah. So that's kind of neat. Yeah. And also, they seem to be in between on price, but the same screen and the same battery life.
I mean, another thing that people often don't think about is, I mean, I was saying one of the great advantages of these is the weight. One of the things we often don't think about in a school environment is the amount of actual materials that school children are expected to carry around. I mean, the Department of Education guidelines actually say that no child should actually be carrying more than about 10% of their body weight regularly, which means for the average 11-year-old, we're only talking about 3.5 to 4 kilograms. Well, the average school bag in the UK already weighs over 5.5 kilograms. So the majority of children in schools in the UK are already carrying bags that are much heavier than they should be carrying. And books make up a considerable proportion of that weight. With a device like this, able to carry effectively, I mean, this will actually carry about 1.5 tons worth of books. It can make a considerable difference in terms of just for all children carrying books around.
So these are the e-ink devices. There's a whole category of e-ink devices. Now, the advantages are many, but the key ones that I think will distinguish from the main category is you can read them in bright sunlight, and the battery lasts for a very long time. Now we're going to come to the second category of devices, which is newer, and it's the tablet. So let's start with the granddaddy that's only about 4 years old, but still a granddaddy of the tablets,
which is the iPad. Basically, runs the difference between this and one of the those devices is that you can do a lot more with a tablet than you can with one of these conventional book readers. So I can use this as a book reader, but I can use this as all sorts of other things as well. When I'm using it in a book reading mode, one of the great things about it is, of course, I actually have full colour. So if I go back to my library on here, I can launch a full colour book, and you can see that I'm now not just limited to black and white or white on black. I can now have full colour illustrations. I can zoom in on those illustrations. I can feature video, I can feature animation, and I can have much more complex visually books than I can do on any of those devices.
And of course you can have full video and audio as well.
You can have full video and audio on them too.
And I mean, even though the Kindle 3G allows you very rudimentary browsing of the internet,
this obviously gives me full internet experience.
Okay, so those are the advantages of the iPad. So what are some of the disadvantages?
Well, the disadvantages, obviously, they're more expensive. For starters, you can probably get four of those for the price of one of these. They're also considerably heavier as well. I mean, the iPad isn't that heavy, but when you compare it in weight to the Kindle, there's quite a difference in weight. Other disadvantages of it, because it's got this lovely full colour screen, it is actually quite reflective, and because it's a touch screen as well, and it has this layer of toughened glass on the front, that actually makes it very reflective. So these can be extremely difficult to read under certain lighting conditions. So if you have a visual impairment, you can get a lot of glare off these.
Now, one of the things that it feels a lot more fragile, even though I have seen some tests that show that the iPad can withstand quite a bit of rough handling.
Yeah.
I myself have dropped the Kindle a number of times, and it seems to do very well with this. And the iPad, how do they do in your experience in the school environment in terms of withstanding the rough treatment children might put them through?
Well, it isn't designed for a school environment. That's the thing to think of all of these devices. But in particular with this, you've got this nice big pane of glass on the front of it. Although it is quite tough, the glass, if you tend to drop this, and what I've discovered with iPads is they are quite robust as long as you don't drop them onto the glass bit and they hit on the actual glass area. In that case, the glass is the weak point in these devices, if you like.
So the iPad is, in a way, redefined the category of a tablet.
Yeah.
But it has, by basically being almost simulating the functionality of a computer.
Yeah.
But giving up on the idea of the e-ink, and so that's
and also on battery life as well. I mean, as we said before, the Kindle will give you up to a month of battery life. This will give you about 10 hours of battery life. So
Because the thing to remember, the Kindle and the Kobo, they measure their battery life in page turns because there's no energy being spent just displaying a page only when you're turning it. Whereas every time this page is on, or even if it's just in standby mode, the battery's being
because
used.
you've got that backlight in and it's powered up all the time.
So the iPad is the thing people know about, but there are many alternatives and competitors to the iPad.
Yeah.
So iPad is from Apple and it's using their iOS system, which is the same as the iPhone.
Yeah, it's Apple's mobile phone operating system that's running on there.
And the competitor to that is the Android operating system from Google, which again is on many other devices. So we have some alternatives here. So for example, we have the Samsung Tab, which is an 8.9 inch, slightly smaller, but actually the screen area is quite successful. And then we have the Lenovo 7-inch version here, so which is again a tablet which is more like the size of the Kindle.
That's right, yeah.
But again, the same battery and screen issues, but the full internet and full applications. So do you have, so in your experience, what are some of the differences between the sort of Android stable of devices and the iPad?
Well, obviously the big advantage of the Android is because these are available from a range of manufacturers, they come in a range of prices, a range of functionality, and as you can see here, in a range of sizes. So that's the big advantage of it. Also, one of the other things is that because Android is an open operating system, then manufacturers can actually take that operating system and tweak it to their particular device. So Amazon in the US have released, they have the Kindle Fire in the US, which is similar to this 7-inch tablet, and it runs a version of the Android operating system that has really been optimized to work with the services that Amazon supplies. So it will work well with Amazon's cloud, and it works well with Amazon's other online services and its bookstore, for example. What that means, though, is that there is a range of functionalities and variations in the operating system, which means it might be confusing for someone to move from one Android tablet to another Android tablet because they will work in a slightly different way.
Like we can see it here, and both these different versions of the Android operating system, so you can see you turn them on, they look a bit different. They look different on the screen. But they're relatively easy to figure out. The other thing to remember, of course, is that you have you can own one of them and the Kobo or the Kindle, and then you have these same applications. So it's even goes as far as that it syncs where you are. So when you're reading a book on the Kindle, then you go to the iPad or the Android tablet, and you have the Kindle reading application. We have one right here, and it takes you to the same. To the same place. So these are very versatile. But again, the battery's for a day, not for a day.
That's right.
And the bright sunlight makes it almost impossible to read out there. So these are devices that are sort of ultimately mobile. They're designed to be mobile, carried around, and they have their limitations. So what are some of the limitations because of the sort of the origin and designs of these?
Well, I think what I find these tablets are very good at is, if you like, using them as consuming devices. They are very good for reading books on, they are very good for watching films on, they're very good for browsing the internet on. Where I think they fall down is they are not a computer. They are effectively a tablet running, both in the case of the Apple and in the case of the Android tablet, they are effectively a device running a mobile phone operating system. So they don't have all of the functionality that you have on a full computer operating system. They are not multitasking in the sense you can't have different programs running sitting on top of each other. You can run multiple programs, but it's difficult to get programs to interact with each other like you might be used to doing on a computer.
So there's no way to have one page on half of an iPad screen, another page on comparing them, like precisely, you could on even a netbook.
And when we think in terms, when we're looking at computer access on a computer, we get used to running a word processor, and then we get used to running applications that sit on top of the word processor, like word prediction programs or word bank programs or other programs that work in conjunction with it. You can't do that with any of these devices. They're not truly multitasking in that way that multiple programs can run and interact with each other. So they're much better as consuming devices for doing one thing at a time.
I mean, to compare them to the phone, I mean, I have my phone here, and you can see that when you come to the front page of my phone, it looks very much like the front page of a device like this. And sometimes, I guess you have to go back something like this. And so the phone, so the front page of an, well, even like if you compare this, it's just basically usually just basically rows of icons, and they're very simple. They're very simple. They're great for watching videos, reading books, obviously, which is also why many people use the phone to read their books. But they're just basically a phone plus.
Yes.
Plus a lot.
Plus a lot, but they are still at their heart, they're basically a mobile phone.
Yes. So here we come to the last piece of mobile technology.
Now this is actually an old device, but what I put on here is the latest version of the Windows operating system. And you can see that what Microsoft have done is actually completely redesigned the Windows operating system to take advantage of touchscreen technology and to actually give you an interface that works much better as an interface for a tablet type device. So you can see on here I have these little icons for launching programs, but at the same time I can click on one of these icons and go straight back to my desktop, and the big advantage of that is I can use it with any of my conventional Windows programs.
Now, so historically, I mean, this is interesting because we called the iPad the granddaddy of tablets, but that's not really true.
No.
Tablets have been around for a long time.
That's right, yeah.
And in fact, Microsoft tried to make them popular in the very early, at the turn of the century.
That's right, yeah. There was a range of them.
Yeah, but they failed. And why was it that they failed? Why did they fail, and why did the iPad, and why are we sort of coming back now to Windows?
Well, I think the main issue was the fact that what they were trying to use it with at the time was the conventional Windows that was running on the desktop computer. And the thing is that interface didn't ideally suit using a touchscreen. This particular device, for example, was originally a Windows 7 tablet that I had. And it worked well, but by the Windows 7 didn't lend itself for touchscreen technology. So by going back and completely redesigning the interface so it worked with touchscreen technology, they've made it, if you like, able to function as it. It was a question of the interface. The technology to do tablets has been there for some time. It was a question of them coming up with the actual interface that worked. And I think that's what made the iPad really popular, was the simplicity of the interface and how simple it was to use that interface with the touchscreen. You didn't have to do anything really complex. It worked just quite easily with the tip of your finger. And I think Windows 8 is going to do that for Windows on tablets as well.
But as you say, the key thing here is that if I attach it, because we can, the thing we forgot to mention, you can attach a keyboard to any of these tablets as well.
Yeah.
But pretty much the only thing you can do is type. You cannot do any of the navigation and things like that you're used to from a computer with a keyboard.
That's it.
But this is a full operating system.
It's a full operating system, and it means the other advantage, because it's running on hardware that's been designed to work with Windows technology, that you'll be able to use a lot of your existing hardware with this as well. So this particular tablet, for example, just got standard USB ports. Now, for someone with special needs, the advantage there is that you can take some of your existing access devices, like alternative keyboards, like alternative mice, head controllers, eye gaze controllers, whatever, plug them directly into this and use them with the tablet. You don't have to begin again.
So basically, when you go, but even for somebody who's a normal user, you can
using
bring it home, just put it, you plug in your keyboard, your mouse, and just using it as a normal computer.
And because it's still Windows, it still has all of those keyboard alternatives. Whereas these, because they were designed really for a device that would never have a keyboard attached to it, in most cases when you're working with applications on these, they don't have keyboard alternatives to a lot of the programs. So
what do you think is the future of these e-reading devices? Do you think that the we're in the very early days of the Windows 8? We're also in the very early days of Android tablets, really, and the iPad isn't that old itself.
No, I think tablets are now here to stay. I think, as you said before, tablets appeared and then disappeared for a while, and I think they are now, the technology is now in place for tablets to be here to stay. I think tablets and some of these other devices have, I think, opened up technology to a group of people who weren't particularly interested in computers. And it's interesting, the people who I've known in the past who shied away from computers, desktop computers or even laptop computers, are taking up tablets, taking up e-book readers to a much greater extent. And so it's actually, I think they're causing a burst of interest in technology in a group that were traditionally a bit shy of using technology. I think tablets are here to stay. I think they will always be now one of the various devices that we use.
Now, so what would you recommend to a school making decisions about purchasing these things, or even an individual?
For a school at the moment, I would say it's pretty much at the point you need to go out and think what you want to do with it, rather than getting the technology in and then trying to get your pupils to fit the technology. Think long and hard about what you want to do with the technology before you put it into place. If you have a Microsoft network and you want to bring in this tablet technology and connect it to your existing Microsoft network, you may want to consider waiting till the Windows 8 tablets come along, because it may be considerably easier for you to interconnect that with the devices you've already got. If you've got Apple technology in place in the school, you may want to think about the iPad, because that will obviously interface with the technology you've got. It really is a case of, what I always try to say is, don't get carried away with the lure of the technology. Always think first about what is it you're trying to do with the technology, and then look at what these different options have in place for you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's a good note to end on. So thank you very much to Jamie Munro from Inclusive Technologies.
Thank you for watching. For more tutorials or information about Load2Learn, please visit load2learn.org.uk or contact us on 0300 303 8313. Copyright 2012 Dyslexia Action and RNIB. Licensed under the Creative Commons license by attribution for non-commercial purposes and shared alike.